I wish I had a substantive update about this ridiculous, forever ongoing, never ending, torturous Tunnelgate situation, which everybody under the sun is fed up with at this point. But don't blame me because I'm sorry, the continued absence of 8 guys, at least 6 of whom, in my opinion, have no business being suspended, is a story as long as the story is not furthered with some type of a substantive update. So as much as I want to say, oh, let's just move on, enough's enough, these guys are still floating out in limbo. You can't say enough's enough until it's resolved. And once we have a resolution, we can spend 2 days talking about whatever the resolution was, whether it was too much, not enough, just right. And we can have that conversation. And then we can move on. My perception, I think, is a reflection of the perception of most people, certainly on the Michigan State side. I mean, that goes without saying, but even a lot of Michigan people, we talked to John U. Bacon about it. He agrees this investigation has gone on appallingly long from an optics standpoint, from a PR standpoint. People are pissed off. But I want some semblance of objectivity and reason here, because it's easy for the PR person, the fan, the journalist to say, hurry up already, this is bullshit. What's taking so long? It's a different take hearing it pro or con from an attorney who's actually well-versed in this process to reflect upon, is this timeline reasonable or not? We'll get to Wade Fink in 1 second. We'll start here. The Freep headline, to give you an idea of the timeline that we're working with here. As we record this or broadcast this, it's November 21st. So this is 9 days ago. The University of Michigan Police just released a statement stating that they, in conjunction with the MSU police, have completed their investigation of the Michigan Stadium tunnel incident from the Michigan MSU game and forwarded the findings to Washtenaw County Prosecutor's Office for review. So we are into the second week since these results were handed over, and there's been absolutely no update at all. I've talked to one of the players suspended. I've talked to multiple Michigan State people inside that building. There's no secret clarity that they have. People are pissed off. People are wondering if they're being snowballed here with the rivalry in a Michigan State hating county. There's all sorts of conspiracies flying around. Let's bring some logic into it. Pro or con, Wade Fink, good friend of mine, the unofficial, official legal counsel for this show. Wade, welcome back to Off the Curb.
Thank you, Justin. I appreciate it, and I always appreciate your trust in talking about legal topics. I hope I can add some clarity.
Me too, because I did not discuss this with you off air, and I'm as confused as I'm presenting. There's no act here. I'm frustrated. Help me get to a rational, logical place here. We're 9 days past the results being handed over. This is not the Warren Commission investigating the assassination of JFK. Happy anniversary in the saddest way possible tomorrow. Is this timeline absurd? Is this sort of an average timeline for this type of case? What's your experience? What's your take on that?
So let me do some short answers first with as much definiteness as I can give you, being not only a criminal defense attorney who does this, but also, knowing Ellie Savitt and some of the other, folks involved. I may root for Michigan State, but I didn't go to either school. So hopefully I can be some sort of a neutral voice on this. Ellie Savitt is one of the best prosecutors in the country. I have no hesitation saying that. I haven't had a ton of cases with him. I do know a lot of his work, and I know a lot of people who work with him. He has the utmost integrity. He is a deliberative, thoughtful, good person at his core, regardless of who he roots for. I've seen the conspiracy theories and the tweets. He is one of the finest prosecutors, not only in our state, but in the country. And he cares about people. He cares about youth and adolescents. All of those things are going to be part of this process. I'll talk about more detail about that, but I just wanted to put that to bed right away. This is a good man who there is no partisanship here in the fact that he just, he may joke about being a huge Michigan fan. He is a really, really good person. And I bet you that as part of why he's being thoughtful about this. So, and Justin, jump in and interrupt me if you want to break any of this down. But in short, I think it'd be beneficial for people to understand this and what happens in a criminal investigation. Crime occurs in a city, a county, wherever, and the police investigate it. And those are the fact gatherers. Those are the people that find the evidence, interview the witnesses, pick up the the weapon or the evidence or the DNA. These are the people that put the investigation together and tell a prosecutor what the evidence is. When the police are done, they send it to the relevant prosecutor, and that's what Justin mentioned, and you saw in that tweet. When the police have completed, at least the first portions of their investigation or the bulk of it, they send it to a prosecutor. That can be a city prosecutor. Those are the folks that charge you with civil infractions or small misdemeanors. Those can be county prosecutors, which take the lion's share of prosecutions in our state. They handle misdemeanors, felonies, everything under the sun. And there's state prosecutors as well, like the attorney general. There's federal prosecutors if something's a federal crime. But once it goes there, it goes to review process. It goes to what's called the warrants division. It gets reviewed by a warrants prosecutor. And that person is looking for, all right, I've been given this evidence. Here's what I've seen. Here's the crimes that may have been committed. Here's what the police think may have happened, either a crime or here's what they think the evidence suggests. I need to know this. I need to know more about this, or this is enough. I'm going to charge this crime. It goes through that review process. And once that's done, there's a charging decision made. You are all probably familiar, have heard that term before. And a prosecutor literally signs the file, charge X, X, and X crime, or decline charges and close the file. Prosecutors make that decision. All of that background, Justin, just to give people some context to answer your question directly. This is not at all unusually long. In fact, this is probably right on course with how I would expect it to go. Game was October 29th, if I'm not mistaken. The police take about 2 weeks to do their investigation, and that makes sense too. Think about 100 plus witnesses, all of which you have to take their statement. Sometimes police like to go back a second time for people to endorse that statement, because police will sometimes write down the statement and maybe they got something wrong. So 100 plus witnesses, you have to interview, video, and make sure there's no other video or other things out there. So 2 weeks seems reasonable. And now it's been with the prosecutor for about 9 days. Well, by way of example, I literally talked to a warrants prosecutor today in Oakland County about a case. It's been sitting on her desk for 2 weeks because she's asking for more information. She was willing to talk to me. Sometimes lawyers can get involved at the beginning to try to push one way or another on what the charges should be. So this is not a lengthy amount of time. Perhaps the warrants division, along with Ellie, Mr. Savitt, the prosecutor, want more information. They may be talking, Justin, to lawyers for the 9 individual Michigan State players. They may want more interviews conducted. If any good lawyer, if I was representing one of these kids, I would have been on the phone immediately. Hey, give me a call when this makes it to your office. I want to talk to you about my client. I want to talk to you about the evidence and see if maybe you can put it on a different path. I'm throwing a lot at you, but I just want to give context. There's things like diversion, where it doesn't actually go to court and you can work something out. And I think Ellie, knowing who he is, he's not just one of these prosecutors, and there's a lot of them who just, rubber stamp what the police want. Instead, he wants to make sure he does the right thing. And these are adolescents, all right? And there's stuff floating around that we may not have seen on video. It might not be as open and shut. Trust me, regardless of what side you're on, trust me, you want prosecutors to be doing this. You want them to be thoughtful. You don't want them to rush in decisions. Sure, there's emergency situations where, and obvious and horrible things, mass shootings where charges need to be brought to hold somebody in other situations. But in stuff like this, and if it was your family, you really would want someone to go through a lengthy review to make sure they're getting it right.
So your takeaway is
too long. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. It's a thorough explanation. So your takeaway is there's nothing, not even that it'd be a deliberate sabotage. That's pretty cynical. I don't think that. But your perception is this is not an incompetently paced investigation and charging decision. Is that what
it's not only based on the facts. I mean, nothing suggests that based on the timeline. Not only that, but just from personal experience and knowing Ellie's work and folks who have worked with him a lot. And again, I haven't, but people I trust, in their case results, I know it's not. I know that this is thorough and deliberative, and we want that. I don't think I called them teens once on Twitter, but I think they're mostly 20 and 21-year-olds of the suspended parties. Those are still adolescents. You want prosecutors either engaging with lawyers, thinking about what charges, if any, make sense, or There are facts we don't know. That Jim Harbaugh did not know that evening when he decided to say what he said. That Mel Tucker didn't know, and was a little more refrained and reserved in letting this play out. When we lawyers talk about letting things play out, when we talk about let the facts come out, let this play out, let the investigation take its course, we're not just stalling. We're not saying that because it sounds good. There are lots of things we don't know. There's a reason that trials are so protected with rules and evidence and constitutional rights, because when the facts come out, it's not just based on he said, she said, out of context things, a clip that maybe we didn't see what happened right before that video. That's what investigations are for. That's what we mean when we say let the facts come out. And length of time, I don't think that this is to punish, put the MSU players in a purgatory. No, I think it's caring about their future. I think Mr. Savitt, and I haven't spoken with him, just full disclosure or anything like that, so I don't know. But I would imagine, based on what I know of his reputation and character, and that it weighs on him to do the right thing, whichever way that goes. And as a Michigan State fan, I know that what he decides to do ultimately will based on what he thinks is best. And I hope to tone down any preemptively, or as an anaphylaxis, prophylaxis, not anaphylaxis, as a prophylaxis, try to keep temperatures down. This is a very good, thoughtful office that is going to do what they think is right based on the facts. His chief assistant, Victoria Burton Harris, worked with her on cases before. These are good, thorough prosecutors who care about people.
You're a football fan, as am I, and there's sort of a saying, if there's a 50-50 call, challenge flag comes out, the longer it goes, the announcer always says, this is not great for the challenger because they're looking so hard. And, if it's an obvious overturn, you normally know that in the first 30 seconds, maybe a minute. Is there any meat on the bone to the theory of, man, he's been looking at this for a while and we still haven't decided to not press charges against any individual or all of them? Is there any merit to that where it's like, the longer this goes, even if it's not long yet, in general, the longer it goes, the less favorable it might be to the Michigan State guys involved?
In law, it's all tea leaves, but you could make a case for both. On the one hand, you could say, look, guys, this isn't as obvious as it seems, right? And I do this all the time if I have a jury out. Oh, thank God they've been out for so long. They must be talking about something, or someone's talking for us. And, they take forever and there's a guilty verdict, or vice versa. They come back fast and you're like, oh, well, no chance, we won, and you win. So you're reading tea leaves a lot, but you can make the case either way. On the one hand, there's something not obvious here. There's other evidence. You had another attorney on who said there's more to the story. Maybe there's other witnesses or something happened before those videos. Maybe there's more interviews that need to be done. Maybe something caught somebody's eye and called the University of Michigan police and said, we want another interview of this person done, or have you looked into this? But on the flip side, Justin, maybe there isn't more. Maybe it is as obvious as Jim Harbaugh made it sound the night of. Maybe it is, and you just have people being thorough and making sure that something doesn't surprise them, right? That something, they make a charging decision, and all of a sudden there's evidence they missed or weren't thoughtful or thorough about, and now you're already in the process. So I wish I wasn't giving you such a lawyerly answer, but I think it's tea leaves to read it either way. I would tell you, your audience, and I know you trust me to tell your audience, I would tell you, and I think I have when we talked about the Patrick Lyoya case, when I have concerns about law enforcement or a certain department or a certain prosecutor, I don't have that here. I think this is just thoroughness and deliberativeness, and being deliberative is what I think.
And you've been a vociferous defender of the individual involved, Ellie, right? Am I pronouncing his name?
Ellie Savitt, yep.
Yep. And we pulled a couple of the conspiracy theories from Odell Bredum Jr., who's a friend of mine, and you put him on blast. Ben, you roll
I love him, but
you put him on blast for that one.
I had to for that.
Yeah, well, we'll play that or show it. So I won't read these verbatim, but Odell, I don't know if these were sent to him, but whatever, he shared it, and this is from Ellie. He's talking about, I'm not going to mention that, gosh, it's too bad that Michigan State won't be nearly as exciting this year, or remind Michigan State fans that Michigan remains the clear-cut Big Ten favorite. He's talking about, he's mocking Michigan State when Imani Bates decommitted. I swear so-and-so talked about how good MSU was going to be for 2 straight years, blah, blah, blah. Go to the next one, Ben. From the start of this tragedy, Michigan State's leadership has been more concerned with protecting the institution, its finances, et cetera, talking about the elevation of John Engler and the interim president's role in the wake of the Larry Nassar stuff. And then Odell was proud to point out that in this last tweet, nothing about Bo Schembechler or the controversy there out of Ellie. So this is an individual that's been extremely critical of Michigan State. And those were not all-inclusive examples. There are many, many out there, and hasn't said anything publicly that we could find or he could find on Bo Schembechler, a major, major story nationally right behind him. You can speak to his integrity. I don't know him. I'm not impugning him. I don't know. And those weren't something that I shared.
Sure.
But that optic is not one weird troll out there. There's hundreds of likes and retweets and comments and that perception. Your response to this that you shared publicly, we'll finish here before I throw it back to you, Ben. If you can throw Wade's, do you have Wade's fiery response to this? This is absolute trash. Ellie is one of the best prosecutors in the country. There's no better person to consider the whole picture, including the fact of adolescence, referring to the players. You're speaking on things you are clueless about. Ellie will do what's right. That's his reputation. So I stand by you. If you know the guy, you should share your opinion. The way if someone impugns your character, I'd have no problem being like, hey guys, Wade's a straight guy, like he's a straight shooter. You can trust him, So I have no problem with that. And I don't know him, so I'm not even pushing back on that. But the perception is there. And I think when you get into these criminal trials, we've seen the perception of imbalance, the perception of impropriety can be problematic, even if it's not actually there. It just looks like it's there. Is there any issue? I'm not talking about integrity. I'm talking about objective, legally speaking analysis. Is there any issue where charging decision comes out? They make a decision to charge, let's say 2 of them. It proceeds to trial. And these guys can say, look, this guy's got 100 tweets ripping on Michigan State. He hates Michigan State. Is there anything to that where that's problematic, where he would have to recuse himself or it would undermine the prosecution? If you were a defense attorney in this case representing one of these kids, is that an issue you would bring up? What's your take on that?
So, as an initial matter, in my defending Ellie, it's more defending what the principles he stands for and that I've seen him represent. I don't even really know him personally. I mean, I dealt with his office, and I'm sure he knows who I am, and I certainly know his work. I'm defending the cases that I know how he's resolved it. I know how he likes to be as a prosecutor, what his belief in criminal justice is. So that's what I'm speaking to, and how he's a progressive prosecutor, he calls himself, and that's a different view of the criminal justice system, more in line with my beliefs. So that's where that staunch defense of that comes from, because I think that's so important to both Michigan State, everybody in this state. That good prosecutors continue to be good prosecutors. But Justin, there's a legal principle that maybe people have heard of before, maybe have some. I certainly know you have, because being a law student is probably something we all hear first year. That the appearance of justice is just as important as actual justice, right? Remember, we learned that. So that is always the case. And when you talk about bias, or you talk about problems with judges maybe having a prejudice or a bias against the client, you're looking at those kind of things. And if it's ever really to the point where you have to raise it, that's kind of the argument, right? That the appearance of justice is just as important as actual justice. What I know about Ellie, or anyone knows about his reputation, well, what's the appearance? This is not and so getting to that issue as to whether this is a legal problem, jest and trolling and fun with a rivalry that I think those tweets are. The Nassar thing is certainly pushing the line. There's to be sure, but I don't think that would call into question. It's certainly not. I don't think any judge would find any merit to that calls into question somehow that he's being less than fair. You don't have to prove that someone's been prejudiced, so to speak, by bias if the appearance of bias is strong enough. I just don't think that those tweets get you there. And I think there's, from the governors to AGs all across the country, there's banter back and forth about rivalries. And sure, maybe he should be a little more cautious with his words, being in charge of Washtenaw County, where the university is. So perhaps he should be more cautious going forward. But I don't see any issue with it. And I certainly don't think from a legal standpoint that that would have any legs. Now, if something outrageous is done on the facts, which I don't expect to happen, but if if some charge beyond anything that would be expected or supported by the evidence or facts, well, maybe you start to wonder why, and that becomes more relevant. But I just don't expect that to happen because I expect his process to be pretty fair and balanced.
This shit would get a juror tossed out. I don't need you to confirm that. If Walmart's involved in a lawsuit and it comes out that a juror has 100 tweets railing against Walmart, that guy's getting excused from the jury, right?
I don't know that that's true for
Oh,
cause.
come on.
For cause, there's two types of jury challenges. There's for cause, and then there's something called a peremptory, where a lawyer can dismiss someone. For cause, you have to show an actual bias that affects their fairness. A lawyer always has to follow up with the ultimate question. Well, despite what you tweeted, Mr. So and so, could you be fair? And oftentimes, the jury says, yes, of course, I'll do my duty. And then you don't have a for cause. The judge isn't going to say, well, he's biased. Now, I know what I think, right? And I could say, Judge, I'd like to thank and excuse this juror and use one of my limited challenges. So, in that regard, sure, a lawyer could do that. But no, I mean, you're going to have potentially a lot of jury. I mean, if I was called to this jury, I'm sure I have some tweets where I am not so nice to Jim Harbaugh or something. But no, I think if something is so brazen and so over the top, of course it could be an issue. It could be an issue, just with your views in general. If someone were to look that deeply into your social media and find something, if you're a juror. But this kind of thing would be if the tweets were similar to what you put on the screen of a juror. I don't agree with you that would get you booted for cause. Certainly, a lawyer would look at it.
Oh yeah, I'll defer to the expert on that one. It doesn't look great. I mean, and the other thing, the key distinction here that people I don't think understand is that it's not a charging decision; it's charging decisions plural. There's 8 guys being looked at here, maybe more that we don't even know about, but we know for sure at least 8 guys. Look, I can't say I know for sure what happened. I know for sure what Michigan State people are telling me happened. I know what one of the suspended players is telling me happened. A couple of these guys, varying accounts even from this person on how many, whether it's 2 or 5 or whatever, but consistently reported from multiple sources, a couple of these guys at least, it was basically like a shove or two as they're getting knocked into very minor stuff, completely different from somebody swinging a helmet and connecting. I mean, you're talking about 2 different galaxies of liability and criminality. Is there any reason to think this has to come out as some package deal where the Washtenaw County prosecutor is going to announce all 8 decisions at once? Why can't they? You say, oh, it's totally normal. If some of these guys are just pushing a guy, can't we get like these guys back to their lives? I think this is a little absurd that there's at least a couple of them from everything I've been told. I can't swear by it. I didn't see it. At least 2 for sure that it's like there's worse than that after games like all the time from what I was told. Can't we get these guys back? Is there any merit to kind of being at least a little bit sour about those guys? Maybe not the helmet swinging as much.
Yeah, and I think that's fair argument. And I think if you were the attorney for one of those individuals, certainly if I was, that's what I'd be saying. And I would say, I would have called the warrants division. I'd said, hey, whoever's reviewing this file, can I speak to them? I would advocate. I say this is their last, year, or they only have a few games left, and they school and all these things in their early 20s that affect the rest of their lives and in the best parts of their lives. I mean, each day matters very much. Those are the arguments you would make. But Justin, in the grand scheme, I just reiterate to people to understand, as frustrating as it is, 3 weeks in the criminal justice and legal world and the legal system is the equivalent of an hour. It's a very short period of time. And to the point about the culpability of different actors here, that's relevant to a charging decision too, is assigning the relative level you believe of culpability from most severe to least severe, and how you're going to charge it, because that also has to reflect fairness too. If you are going to charge someone or someone's criminally, it certainly has to reflect fairness, that you considered the conduct as it compared to other conduct that occurred that evening. So that's also part of the decision. And I think probably the best practice in that regard is to give a full review and accounting of what happened in that tunnel, and make decisions based on everything rather than piecemeal. It probably just makes more sense, as frustrating as that is and unfair that might be to the ones who don't get charged, or who end up with maybe some kind of diversion agreement or something. But in the end, protecting their criminal record and their ability to have lives and careers, and not be restricted in finishing school, and all those things will outweigh the remaining games. I'm sure you'd agree with me on that, but that doesn't take away the frustration that I would be advocating the same way you are if I was one of their lawyers.
Some of them don't have remaining games after this, and that's the
Fair
problem.
enough.
It's like,
Right.
I'm gonna come out and, okay, we're not charging you. It's
That's true.
thanks, but uh, I mean, couldn't you have just not punished me, a week ago, so I could at least play my last college game, knowing it's my last college game? And that's where it's just a bummer. And I get, I mean, you're a
Well,
defense
Michigan
attorney.
State's part of that decision too, Justin. I mean, I know there's politics and decision makings that have to go with a big institution, and criticism and public affairs, and you have to consider all of those things. But Michigan State made that decision, right? There's nothing, no bond condition, nothing preventing them from allowing them to play. I mean, they are not charged criminally. So some of that falls on the decision that the program made and the university made. I think the statement that was made by the university, I forget if it was the president, the apology that was made so quickly without knowing the facts, I think that's as misguided as Jim Harbaugh's comments on the evening. We just didn't
Oh,
know yet.
wow. So you don't like the Michigan State apology? You're the
I
first
just don't
person
like
I've heard say that.
I don't like the timing of just reacting with such shock and horror when no one knows what happened. I'm not saying that something crazy happened before the helmet swing, but if it did, I have no reason to believe it. Diamond can say it happened. I don't know. To be clear, so everybody's. But if it did, isn't that apology a little premature? Shouldn't we know the facts and understand what happened first before we're all jumping to conclusion? From Harbaugh saying that there should be criminal charges, from the university saying it's the most appalling thing they've ever seen, or whatever that quote was, such a horrible thing. We just don't know. And maybe it is. Maybe it is the most egregious, awful thing we've seen in this rivalry. Maybe it was totally with no what's the word I'm looking for? Aggression from Michigan with no
No provocation.
provocation. Thank you, Justin. You're such a good lawyer. Without any adequate provocation, it probably, or maybe, or likely is. I don't know. But until we know more, I just feel like everyone needs to be cautious with their words and their passions and their and that, I think that goes around. So it's not that I have a problem with apologizing, especially if someone's hurt, but just with the definiteness with which you speak, because we're going to know more, I think, once this investigation is done. That's my only criticism. Anybody who acts or speaks with definiteness without knowing the full facts, myself included, I make that mistake all the time. I think that is we should all reserve and wait to know more before we give such conclusory statements.
Not in the Twitter era. I mean, it's a nice thought, but good luck with that one.
That's the problem, and I'm guilty of it too.
Oh, me
And
too. I'm not casting aspersions. I
these
overreact to everything.
these rivalries and the passions that they inflame are the same things that I argue about the adolescent brain and impulse control, but it happens in adults. It's the amygdala of our brain, which excitement, anxiety, fear, anger, it leads to a very difficult impulse control. That's particularly true in adolescence, but it's also very true with us who are not adolescents too, when it comes to Twitter and social media and wanting to get out ahead of things. And so my criticism is more so everybody deep breath and let's see what the facts are. If they are as egregious as that video appeared, then we'll see. I think part of the statement, recalling the part of the statement, for example, was there's no justification for it. Well, there may is a theoretical justification for it if someone's defending themselves. I don't know that that's the case, but I don't think the university president knew that at the time the statement was made. So we'll see what the facts are, and then everybody can unwind it and make their statements and what they think and what we should do going forward.
Putting a button on it. I mean, you mentioned in passing David Diamond, the attorney who's representing one of the suspended players. he was on this show claiming that effectively a Michigan player was coming in with his helmet on, head down like a battering ram, kind of knocking his way through. I'm not going to get into degrees of provocation, but that's certainly a provocative action to some degree. You can have the argument about to what degree. So there are different accounts here, and he's claiming that he has multiple witnesses on the record saying that in his own investigation. So who knows? I'm with you on the wait and see thing. Again, the problem with the wait and see thing is as we're waiting, a couple of these guys' careers are ending and they can't get that back. So it's like the wait and see approach is great. There's so much collateral damage. And it's like, if they did something horrible, okay.
But I don't know that that criticism belongs with the Washtenaw County prosecutor. I mean, I think you got to direct some of that at the university and what they think is right. Perhaps the suspension only should have been for the most two egregious that are on video and the rest not. I'm not saying that they should have or shouldn't have. I'm saying the party making that decision, Justin, was the university.
I yes and no, though, because don't you understand the optics if you're Michigan State? You're already getting blasted. If they put a guy back on the field who was then later criminally charged for something they already knew happened, they knew something happened. I get it. I get why they
are
made
asking
that.
to sacrifice accuracy and deliberation in a very serious, criminal portion of this, which will affect a lot more than just their college careers potentially. You're asking that part to sacrifice because the university did things because of the optics. And I'm not saying it's wrong to do that. Again, I don't want to be tortured later for my words. I'm just saying that these are the kind of thoughts that we have to make if we're going to say, well, enough's enough. Well, who's making these decisions? My argument would be the most important thing is that the Washtenaw County prosecutor take the time that they feel is necessary. That is what I would say is important. The peripheral part of that, I think, belongs other decision makers. And what's the proper thing to do?
Who's going to tackle Sean Clifford in the open field? That's the chief concern around it. No, it's just the whole thing. It's just a bummer, especially for the guys that are more minorly involved in this. They're watching their entire career potentially, at least this season, wither away because they allegedly got bumped, pushed a guy back, and then that's the extent of their involvement. That's only a couple. I'm not saying that's all of them, but there's at least two that seems to be the case. Just a bummer. Last thing, and I kept you way too long. I apologize.
Okay.
The conspiracy theory out there among several, but a big one is we're going to find out that a Michigan guy was involved in provocation to some degree, did something that we don't know about, although David Diamond says we know all about it. And they're withholding this until after the Ohio State game. That's out there. I'm not going to ask you to weigh in on the conspiracy theory because you've already dismissed all that stuff and you've defended the integrity of this process, which I respect. And I frankly agree with you. I'm not questioning that. But just from a procedural standpoint and how this is going, you mentioned reading tea leaves. Is the theory that this is going on for a minute, it's awfully quiet, we have this allegation, multiple witnesses saying a Michigan guy started it, quote unquote. Reading the tea leaves, do you think there's a solid chance that with what we're looking at, it's going to come out that a Michigan guy provoked it, did something to provoke it, and then Michigan State overreacted, had some culpability in some degree? If you had to just guess, I know it's speculation, but just with what we know, does the pacing of this seem to lead to a river where, oh shit, a Michigan guy is involved in some capacity?
I mean, it depends on how we're defining involved. I'm virtually certain.
Involved to where they could be, it's something they would get suspended for or perhaps even criminally charged is what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about trash talk. I'm talking about came in, swinging or pushing or something. Something that you could reasonably be charged for and it would not be a frivolous charge.
I'm going to leave the speculation to the wildly talented folks like you, Justin. But what I will say is that when you have the opportunity to read these police reports and interviews and FOIA this stuff, I'm virtually certain, unless David Diamond is making it up, that there is going to be witness statements in there that tell a story of some sort of impetus for the fight in the side room there and the swinging of the helmet. I'm sure there's an impetus. That impetus might be something really frivolous, like he gave him a shoulder bump or something like that. I don't know. And again, that's why I'm preaching over and over to everyone that you be very cautious before you speak with definiteness. But yes, to answer your question, I'm sure there's going to be statements in there that there was some sort of impetus for this, that something triggered it. I don't know how minor or major that's going to be. And I absolutely I would say it'd be the most shocking thing in my legal career if Ali Savitt, who has committed himself to criminal justice and being a reformer, that's like his purpose, if he was sacrificing that to give Michigan a marginal benefit against Ohio State. It'd be the most shocking thing I've ever, so shocking that it's not even worth entertaining. So the conspiracy I reject, but as to whether there's probably something interesting, yeah, there's going to be witness statements about what it was. It might have just been talk, and it might have been wholly unjustified to swing that helmet, and maybe it was a felonious assault. Or there's going to be, potentially that's part of the review, that someone came in like a battering ram using their helmet, and, whether or not it was self-defense may not be the issue, but certainly it becomes a lot more understandable how things escalate. That it wasn't just random. That would certainly give you some explanation whether you accept it or not.
I think we just got to get like Tom Mars and David Diamond in like
let me moderate those two.
I don't want to moderate them. I want to do I want to do like the Will Ferrell with the microphone descending from the sky. Get him in the KY pit and let those two fight, in the winner, we either charge or we don't charge. Let's let them battle it out. I mean, one's in the criminal realm and one's in the civil, but let's let them solve it, because they have completely different versions of the story. You mentioned FOIA. If we're getting FOIA involved, I'll see in 2026.
Yeah,
story. I mean, as you and I know, that's it. We'll leave it there. Wade, I love you, man. I took you for double the time. I apologize. You give such thorough, great answers.
I feel like I talk too much, but I want people to understand. I think it's so important. So when clients come to me, kids and parents, there's very little understanding of how the process works. So I just feel like there's a value. I hope I'm providing a value to people explaining it, because the better you understand it, the more you get why we do things the way we do them.
So when Ellie does take that step to execute his master grand plan and sabotage the Michigan State football program as he's been planning since high school, would you represent one of the Michigan State players if they called Wade Fink?
Of course I would. I'd represent a Michigan player, and I'd represent a Michigan State player, because everybody deserves a defense. The University of Michigan is a wonderful university who I hope loses in sports, but has put some of the most incredible discoveries on planet Earth out into the world. And Michigan State, I root for their sports, and equally has done amazing things for the world. So yes, I would represent the Michigan State players. I would represent the Michigan players. If anyone asked me, I would happily do that. But I will always root for green, and that's solely because that's where Mom went. So I'm a Walmart Spartan.
Your mom's both your parents historical attorneys in this community, in this state, and I mean, your dad is like the thing of legends, and your mom wildly successful too. I didn't even know your mom was a Spartan, but now I like her even more. So anyway, Wade Fink.
The only reason I'm the Walmart Spartan, and I'm proud of it.
Oh, you're welcome. We need all the help we can get. Most of the non-affiliated fans go to the other side, so we'll take the support. Wade Fink Law, good friend of mine, man. Appreciate your time. Thanks.
Really grateful. Thank you, everybody.
Off the curb. See ya.